Hello, everybody. We are back. I'm Tom Sosnoff. I'm here with Dylan Ratigan. This is Truth or Skepticism. Mr. Ratigan, welcome home. And
nice to be here. Nice to see you virtually in our native habitat. Mm-hmm. Nice to see you over there as well. I mean, can I discuss this trip to London briefly? Will you indulge me?
Sure, of course.
So just for everybody who was not in London, who's maybe watching this particular podcast, you have to understand what I witnessed on Saturday was the emergence of I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's like a Yoda figure, like a guru, like a Ram Dass, like a messenger of like a philosopher, like a Greek philosopher, maybe.
A philosopher, sure.
Oh yeah, I sort of like you're on the verge, like you've come so far through 40 years of finance that you're on the verge. You're not quite qualified yet because you have a couple major flaws, which we'll talk about today.
Oh, beautiful. I love flaws being exposed.
Major, couple big issues. But, all joking aside, I think that I certainly am pleased and impressed by both the size and intensity of the connection of the European audience for Tasty. It was pretty awesome.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? It was incredible.
Incredible.
Yep.
So for you, you're on the verge of everybody's dream job, which is you get to just wear robes and they carry you around and you just make appearances and utterances. and then otherwise they just feed you grapes and you just wait to tell people what you think. That's the philosopher's life, right? You've earned it.
Yeah.
But, you can't be a philosopher if you don't understand what's going on with Putin and Russia and the world and the United States and all this, because I think you got deeply misguided.
I'm misguided?
Deeply misguided.
You don't even know where I stand.
Well, I have an idea.
Okay.
So I think we have to resolve that because I think that that's a material issue. But I also think that I'd like to look at it through the lens of a marketplace that seems pretty comfortable with what, even at the peak of the hysteria for 24 hours of what's going on in Russia game, the parlor game, even then the markets didn't seem terribly alarmed. So I would say there's two things. One, the realities of, the global petro war and currency war, and the realities of the market's comfort with even the most extreme rhetoric. I guess I'll start with the market. Why do you think the market is not bothered by the parlor game, even if it's, catastrophic apparent headlines, one way or the other?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a catastrophic apparent headline. I mean, the market is not concerned with what happens in Russia because the market is not concerned with what happens anywhere in the world that doesn't that doesn't have a significant impact, on said market. So, Russia is a non-player. I mean, other than its sheer size.
Other than nuclear power and commodities, it's irrelevant.
Russia has three things. It has size, nuclear power, and it has some commodities. The commodities have already been, the commodity risk and everything else around that, because it's the only market that trades freely, is already priced in. You can't price in nuclear risk. I just don't believe you can. And just like you were never able to price in North Korea, you can't price in Russia. You couldn't price in Iran, right? And there is nothing else. The only other thing Russia has left is just space, just size, just a land grab. That's it. There is nothing else in Russia. Russia has been wiped clean. It's as insignificant as some,
Interestingly, I think they've elevated themselves to the best they've been in a very long time by virtue of exploiting this situation to strengthen their ties to India specifically.
Oh, please.
As well as China, and in the process, draw a line to protect themselves from what was the inevitable creep of NATO eastward And so it's like either have a bad situation now or a worse situation later. And so from playing a bad hand, my perception is that actually geopolitically, he's increased his security by virtue of Russia's security by virtue of strengthening the ties with India, China, Brazil.
I couldn't disagree more with that across the board. And the only thing I would say, the only thing that strengthens, the only case Russia has on any level is just the fact that they have this massive amount of land with some, obviously rich in commodities. And the only thing they have going for them is that India, Brazil, China, whoever else doesn't, an American monopoly on everything is not good for any of those countries on their own, because not because it's bad for their economy, but it's bad for from a leverage perspective. It's like, Walmart owning, basically the entire retail marketplace or something like that. So effectively, you lose your leverage, and that's all it is. It's just a leverage game. But other than that, Russia has nothing.
But you say that's all it is in a dismissive way.
Yeah,
and I'm not. But I'm saying the need for leverage.
I am dismissive about it, because I'm as dismissive about it as when people used to make the same argument about Walmart and the same argument about companies like that. And I've always been arguing for the disruptor. And maybe in this case, 10, 20, 30 years from now, India is a disruptor. I don't think they're anywhere close. I think they're decades away, and I think China is not capable of it. So I don't think they're, I think as they all band together, they don't want a monopoly to take away all their leverage. But from a Russia's perspective, they've got nothing. They've got nothing. So
you would argue, even as a group, if they were as a coherent group that was China, India, Brazil, Russia, four countries, let's say, which I know they've got a whole big thing.
Sure, which is absolutely impossible. By the way, what you're about to suggest is the most ridiculous thing.
I understand because of the India-China issue.
Yeah, I mean, India, China, Brazil,
no, but Russia will stand in the middle, and the Brazilians will stay in the middle.
Have you ever talked to any Russians about India? They would sooner cut their own toes off before they ever make a deal with India. And have you ever talked to China
about selling oil? They were happy to sell. They were happy to sell 20% of the oil.
But I'm saying that's it.
The money's still green. The money's still green, my brother.
And the Chinese hate the Indians. The Indians hate the Russians. The Russians hate the Indians hate the Chinese. The Indians hate the Brazilians. The Brazilians hate the Russians. There's no love in any of those places. They're all competitors. They all can't stand each other. And the only thing they have in common is the fact that they don't want the U.S. to be a monopoly, but they need the U.S. as their largest trading partner. They just want to keep leverage. So Russia, getting back to the original discussion, has nothing. They've got nothing left. They've got absolutely nothing. There's nothing there.
They're the largest commodity reserve on Earth, double the United States.
That's all they got.
And that's
all they got.
It's like 75 trillion in commodities.
Listen, I know, but all their bark.
And it's one of the largest petrostates in the world.
I got it. But the only thing that Russia ever had that scared people was the idea, the perception that they had some form of military power, military might, and military power that was somewhere close to, or maybe at some point on a par with the U.S., or at least put a little fear. Now the fact that Ukraine is making them look like complete.
But it's not Ukraine. It's a bunch of NATO and Western weapons.
But it is Ukraine. It's Ukraine with a bunch of sloppy
American
weapons.
Weapon systems, American information systems.
Listen, we always thought, okay, well, Russia couldn't get it done in Afghanistan. They couldn't get it done in Afghanistan, but either could we. So for that reason, maybe they're not as bad as we thought they were. But we knew they were bad. But we didn't know how bad they were. But now we know how bad they are. And now we know how crazy they are.
I just don't. First of all, that's unknowable, and so there's not even a point in arguing about it because of whatever that it is. But what's most interesting to me in this discussion is your idea that even if Russia could intermediate between China and India, at least for money, and Brazil can get in there and run because they got a bunch of oil and commodities, the same racket as the Russians, lots of commodities, lots of oil, lots of corruption, same deal. And if the four of them can get together, you say that even then they don't have leverage, as if I'm hearing you correctly. Even if they could get it together, you believe that there is not leverage.
But you're saying that's, again, you want to form the super team, and there is no such thing in the real world as a super team.
But there are my enemy's enemy is my friend for aligned interests for utilitarian purposes in the world of realpolitik.
Good luck if that doesn't work. Good luck if you go after, if you go after the king,
you got to kill him.
That's right. And if you don't, you are a dead man walking for another couple of decades. That is an insane approach. It will never work, and it's just a joke. I love when people talk about it because it's such a joke. It's never going to happen.
It's already happened. I mean, there already is an economic ecosystem that exists between Istanbul, Dubai,
oh my God,
Moscow, Bangkok, Tel Aviv.
Have you ever dealt with Russians? They don't like anybody that's not like them. They're not dealing with the Chinese, the Indians, or the Brazilians. They won't give them the time. It doesn't exist. It's not even in their vocabulary. They couldn't make a deal with them if they wanted to, unless it was for, that's not part of their culture. It doesn't happen. It will never happen. Russia's
they sold it all to India. Anyway, it's a parlor game at this point, but I actually think it's very interesting because I think it will resolve. I think it has to resolve quickly. I think it has to resolve.
I think it is going to resolve, and I think that the things that have happened recently in Russia, from the whatever you want to call that coup type thing to whatever else. I mean, this is kind of there's so many cracks. It's about to all be over. It's just
I think it's all coming together.
Coming together.
Yeah, he's consolidating.
Oh my God, you're out of your mind. Never.
Consolidating power.
Oh God.
Stabilizing that the U.S. is becoming less popular because they're seen as the agent provocateur.
Oh my God.
A year later, extending the war.
Oh God.
Zelensky wants peace. The Russians want peace. The Africans want peace.
Well, Zelensky
the Brazilians want peace. The Chinese want peace. The Israelis want peace.
Everybody wants peace.
The Americans won't make a deal.
Everybody wants peace. I mean, listen, Ukraine, they need to rebuild their country now from scratch. And the Russians, where are they going to get any money to build the country back? So
oil, come on, oil.
Oh, good luck. Good luck trying to dump all that oil off on the rest of the world when the Saudis are already trying to dump all their oil off on the rest of the world. Everybody else is. Good luck.
Well, it's worked so far, sir. Yeah. Selling oil worked so far.
So you're telling me what all those countries have going for them right now is worked so far, huh? I'm going to argue that it hasn't worked. Okay, they've destroyed their economy and they have absolutely nothing left. So whatever they've done has not worked. They've actually ruined everything about their own existence is gone. They've ruined decades, almost a century of getting their act together. Gone out the window. It's done. Their history.
We're just going to have to disagree again. You're going to have to. This is a major barrier to your guru status.
Oh God.
You're
oh my God.
So the next thing that Josh, who's our producer, who brought this up, and I think it's interesting.
Okay, go.
Do you know anybody that's been smoking toads or anything like that?
No. Yeah, you're going to Elon Musk me now with the go to work high, build $1 trillion company.
All I'm saying is that like the Ivy League universities in New York City, like the Columbias and whatnot, and the editorial pages of like the science section of the New York Times and whatever, the ivory tower, the intellectual elite, have now internalized and taken custody for the administration of LSD in some managed dosage, in the manner that one would argue people like Ram Dass, and I think it was Tim Leary, or they were scandalized long ago for this at Harvard. And it's come back around, 50 years later, 45 years later.
Sure, the revolutionaries and the drug dealers of the 60s, not dealers, I mean the
experimenters, the academics.
Yeah. I mean, they turned out to be the heroes of the 70s and 80s. I mean, essentially, when you look at it that way, I mean, that's what, they were right. They were just a little early.
And that's I'm saying exactly that. And so now here we are, 2023, 2024, and it's become almost, I won't say mainstream, but it is it's a part of a discussion in rooms where it was never previously discussed, in ways that are related to creativity and performance rather than pleasure seeking and escapism, shall we say.
Yeah, the only difference is today that we're in the world today is that this is not, it's not political, it's corporate.
Yeah, LSD's gone corporate.
Yeah. That's kind of funny when you think about it. But then again, I mean, it's a little hard to argue, I guess, when you have the richest people in the world who've built the most successful companies telling you, what are you supposed to do?
I think it's a terrible idea. You can't be running LSD all over
okay,
town.
I'm not. Nobody's agreeing. Nobody's saying
you sound to me like you're agreeing.
No, I'm not agreeing. No, I'm not agreeing.
You're agreeing.
No, I'm not agreeing. But as a shareholder, you'd have a hard time.
You couldn't necessarily criticize it. But anyway, if you sort of go, do you know anybody who's experimented with any of these objects in the corporate context?
I do not. Not in our world. I mean, when I was growing up in the trader business, in the pits of Chicago, I mean, I think that you would have to have been blind not to see the crazy amount of drugs, alcohol, and drugs, and then more drugs. That's
more cocaine and marijuana than LSD, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, there was no LSD didn't really. It was all.
Come on, you're not doing LSD working at the CME. Like, you got to pay attention.
No. It was all cocaine and Quaaludes. But in 2023, it's I don't know the LSD scene. I don't know it at all.
I mean, it's incomprehensible. I mean, it's total rearrangement.
Yeah, no, I don't. It's way outside of my. I don't know anything about it.
So, you want to hear my business proposition, and then we can move on to the next topic?
Sure.
So, I have one friend who did it, which is it's from a toad. I forget the name of this. Some name for this toad. That's some special toad that makes the special toad juice. Okay. And the toad is so popular that it became an endangered species in like the Sonoran Desert in like Arizona by the Grand Canyon. Because all the toad smokers were grabbing the toad. So then toad's not working. But there's a bigger toad in Australia. My point is that the demand, so now there's we'll bring it in from the big toad in Australia, more toad juice per toad.
Okay.
My point is these things have become businesses in a way that's again, Fifth Avenue, Ivy League, to your point, it's as a shareholder, you can't argue with it. But as a person, it strikes me as preposterous to wrap LSD in a corporate presentation.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
I think it is ridiculous, okay?
Of course.
I think it's
Nobody's
absurd.
arguing.
I cannot sit here with a straight face and be like, of course, this is a therapeutic.
Nobody's arguing that, though. I'm not arguing that.
But I think the world is arguing that. The New York Times is arguing that. Columbia is arguing that.
No, they're not.
What are they arguing then?
Well, they're not arguing that.
They're arguing positive mental health benefits with no apparent negative consequence for the use of psychedelics.
Okay, well, I don't understand that.
Me neither.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my point. Doesn't make. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, it sounds beyond ridiculous, but
it's almost like something that's so earnest, they think they'll trick you into believing it because it's so stupid. Anyway, we don't have to continue to have this particular discussion. I think it's clear that that it's not a therapeutic benefit. Ultimately, but it brings me to sort of my biggest thought coming out of the weekend in London with you and listening to all those discussions with all those people about this topic And your example at the end with the birthday paradox, which I know you've talked about on Tasty Trade different ways, and your emphasis for the 80% probability outcome and managing bet sizing to be part of an 80% probability outcome, as a concept, as opposed to, with a lower payout, all the things you talk about. And the only logical barrier to doing that is some degree of emotional regulation and self-discipline to do it, as opposed to being seduced by larger payouts with lower probabilities or thinking that you know things. And what I found interesting is I feel like actually the more informed and the more educated someone is, the more difficult it is for them to release to the world of to abandon their belief that they can know that they know enough to have an opinion on a stock direction. And even you, who's a guru of this topic, still, by your own admission, are consistently have an opinion of things that are going to happen. And so I'm curious how you manage how you allow that 80% probability payout selection bias to be the core of your investment strategy while indulging your opinion on things that you have opinions about every day.
Well, it's one of the biggest challenges that everybody in this industry faces.
Well, I think it's the biggest. That's my point. Is that it was apparent to me coming out of London this weekend that that is the ultimate frontier.
It's why most firms today. It's why I shouldn't say most firms, every firm, they hire data scientists and quants and engineers to run all the trading bots and all the trading applications, because they want somebody that's not going to look at it the same way as a kind of, for the same reason that Earl Weaver would never be hired in 2023 to manage a baseball team, because today you want somebody that's not going to manage off the seat of their pants type thing. And it's the reason Ozzie Guillen can't get another job in baseball, because they don't want somebody that's got instinct. They want somebody that's got an opinion. They want somebody that's going to crunch the numbers instantaneously and give you the best statistical response. And so it's extremely difficult for me. It's my, it's what's always held me back in trading, and it's what's held back every trader, I feel like, over the years is, it's just that at some point, we have an internal conflict. Our ego, we used to call it ego. I don't know what you call it today, but it was always ego in the past. And our egos were, too big for the strategy. It's really pretty simple. And that's it.
So, going back to Ram Dass and the LSD, somebody interviewed Ram Dass when he was, late in his life, in his 80s or whatever. And they said, well, you've been taking LSD and meditating, for 60 years. How much of your neurosis have you gotten rid of? You must be much more calm now than you were 50 years ago. And he said, well, haven't gotten rid of any of my neurosis. And I would say that, if you look at you as the Ram Dass of trading and your own wrestling match with your own opinion over decades, is there any insight that you do you feel like you're better at, do you have advice for me, for others? Considering that's the universal challenge.
Well, so what happens is you create these mechanisms where you recognize that there's a problem, and you recognize the issue within, and which I obviously have, and I try to deal with it in a very mechanical way. So one of the things that when we built Tasty, one of the things that we did was we did a lot of research about the whole concept of, let's call it trade small, trade often. I just bring it up, but the concept of trading small, because what we found was that we really can't eliminate these opinions. It's impossible. We sit here, we watch the market. I mean, I have a strong opinion about what I think, for example, Apple's going to do, or Amazon's going to do, or Google's going to do, or the S&Ps are going to do, or bonds are going to do. I can't get rid of that. It's not possible for me to come in, with a blank slate and think about markets like in completely neutral terms. It's not possible. So how do I not eliminate that risk, but reduce that risk to where it's completely manageable? And we figured it out. You reduce your trade size and you manage early. That's it. We solved the problem by recognizing that we couldn't eliminate that emotion. And what we've done is we've put a mechanism in place, a set of mechanics in place.
And you're saying the fundamental regulator of that is position size.
Position size and management time. So if you manage early, if you control your position size and manage early, you will
manage early, meaning exit sooner than you might otherwise.
That's right. So what you effectively do is you eliminate the outlier risk, and you eliminate the outlier risk, and you eliminate a lot of the directional risk. And by doing that, it's kept us, basically pretty straight.
Which goes to really one of the core of your messages this weekend in London, which is that if you're managing well, you're managing in a way that it's extending your time as a participant, your time at risk. The more time you're at risk, the more opportunity there is for good things to happen, and you can add time at risk by having these smaller positions get by time and increased chance of success. Basically,
yeah. The core of my message was twofold. One is that success is a derivative of longevity, meaning, and success is relatively marginal. And I'm not talking about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. I'm not talking about the one billionth of an outlier type person. Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm talking about if in the top 1, 2, 3%, where there's tens of millions potentially of spots, not where there's 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 spots in the whole world. We're talking about where there's 1 million, 5 million, 10 million spots that you can achieve, and the difference between the people that achieve those top 1 million to 5 million spots in the pecking order, if you measure achievement by wealth creation or something along those lines, is incredibly marginal, and it's a function of longevity. So the longer you can hang around with mechanical or marginal success, you will get to that point, because that's all the differences between great success, mediocre success, and failure. So it's longevity is number one, and that's a really important important piece to this puzzle. And it took me just a crazy long time to understand that. And, and putting that together, I had to combine it with one other thing, which is to convince people, well, first to convince people that, but also then to convince people that our role as a financial disruptor is really not to tell you what to do or how to make money, or for you, Dylan Ratigan, if you're the example, if you're the sample size, how you can create wealth. That's not really fair on us, because I don't think that somebody can do that. What we have to do, and it took me a really long time to get here, because everybody still is in the old school camp of the way that you can basically teach somebody to create wealth and all this stuff. I don't believe that's the case. I believe what we have done, which is unique, is we have explained to people that we have created a series of tools, technical, technology tools, features, platforms, and optimal mechanics that allow you to take that information and do with it whatever you want. And we had to draw the distinction between allowing the Dylan Ratigans of the world to do their own thing rather than tell the Dylan Ratigans of the world what to do. So what we've essentially done is we've created a vehicle, being in this case Tasty, that essentially says, hey, here's some amazing technology, here's some really good content that will help you optimize some of the mechanics, some of your decision making, some of your emotions, some of your processes, and however you want to work that into an efficient market, you go do that. and you understanding all along that, success is something that takes a really long time. It is very marginal, and you have to earn it through longevity. And I've used a lot of
prescribe longevity through filters of selection, things like liquidity and IV and all that, but also by position sizing.
Yes.
That you buy time by staying smaller.
But also longevity also means, like, I use my own, life as an example, and I use other, like, it's very hard to be there's only a couple of examples of, 23, 25, there's only so many, Kylie Kardashians in the world, or Kyrie Kardashians, whatever they are. There's only so many 23-year-old billionaires. And the reality is that the most successful business people, entrepreneurs, whatever it is, it's really at some point, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years down the line, when you've been able to scale and prove things repeatable, that you actually get to that point where you can, that kind of longevity and that kind of marginal edge, where it starts to pay off. And, we've used our own lives as examples of that. And I think that is a very new message. Like, that is not what's taught in academia. And so the idea of creating.
No, I totally agree. Can we explore it a little bit? Because it's like, it struck me when you said it this weekend.
Yeah.
And it struck me the way that the audience was so connected to it. It was such a big room of people from all over the world, very smart people.
Because, Dylan, people are sick and tired of, they've heard people saying, hey, hey, listen to me, the Tony Robbins approach or whatever. I'm just using him as an example, but hey, just follow
some
this.
expert, somebody knows better.
Exactly. And I don't think that's the case. You can't take a bunch of smart people and say, hey, I know more than you, I know better than you. Like we are, I am not the smartest person in the room. There's no doubt about that. But there are things that I have learned over the last 4 decades, which about creating the vehicles for other people to create opportunity for themselves. Like, you'll hear, somebody will come up to me and say, hey, I've been trying to do this. I can't turn the corner. And then, like, somebody else came up, like, I'll get a lot of those, and which is totally normal, because it's really hard to do. And the other side of it is, like, I'll get somebody like this weekend that came up to me and said, I first started with you guys in 2015. I had $10,000. I've made, $3 or $4 million with this approach over the last couple of years. I've turned my life around, and you'll hear that all the time, and you'll be like, oh, that's cool. But I'm saying, but I didn't do any of that. They did it all. Both sides. Right,
but no, but what I think is interesting, and I understand what you're saying. I'm tracking. But I feel like you're sort of, at least what I heard you say this weekend in London, was some version of a present conclusion. And you're obviously welcome to always collect more information. But after 43 years or whatever, you had a couple conclusions. One is that the line between success and failure is incredibly small.
Yes.
That the best players in the NFL are not in the NFL. Right? They were everybody who's in the NFL. There's somebody they played football with in high school or college who was better than they were, who never went to the NFL because whatever, money things, drug things, family, whatever, people blow up for whatever reason. No longevity, right? They just can't keep showing up to practice for whatever reason, or they get injured.
Whatever. Yeah.
But I'm interested to understand what you feel like you've observed that shows you that the difference between success and failure is so thin. And is that something that you thought 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, or is that a new thought? And has it changed? Was there a bigger difference between success and failure when you were 20 years old than there is today?
Well, of course you don't recognize it when you're 20 or 25 years old.
No, of course. I know.
Yeah, because you don't think about life in those terms. You think at that point, you're invincible. Over the years, especially as a floor trader, over the years, I would see all these people come and go, and I never thought much about it. 95% of the people that stepped on the trading floors, 3 months later, they were gone. Mm-hmm. If you started with $50,000 and your seat lease was $12,000 or $15,000 a month, and you didn't make any money for 3 months, you lost your $50,000, you were out of there. You know, you're next, you're on to your next gig,
Next
whatever.
contestant.
Next contestant. So 95% of the people just disappeared. And you didn't realize it at the time. And, you know, you're just hoping at some point, you know, you realize you're one of the survivors at some point. You recognize that, and that you figured out how to survive. But you don't understand how marginal that difference is. You know, how I'm not saying that you're one trade away, but you don't realize how really thin that line is. It wasn't until we started building, you know, doing other things and recognizing, you know, failures that we kind of started to figure it out. You know, you have to fail.
And so then, just to go with it, so then now if the line is thin, which is your assumption, right?
Yeah.
In your core hypothesis, it's the Greek philosopher Sosnoff.
Yes.
That if the line between success and failure is paper thin, then longevity is the key to success. Because if it's such a small margin, if you can continue to have a chance, eventually you're going to get some pluses, not just minuses, because it's too.
That's why we don't put people
close
in the Hall of Fame after 1 year. That's why Darryl Strawberry's not in the Hall of Fame. That's why Dwight Gooden's not in the Hall of Fame. It's not because eventually their life turned into drugs and something like that. It's because, you know, that's why Zion Williamson's not going to the Hall of Fame. You know, it's about longevity. And that's why somebody with a lot less talent, like Cal Ripken, just I'm using a baseball example, but, you know, can last for whatever it is, you know, 20 some odd years, and they're in the Hall of Fame with a lot less physical talent, you know, than a Dwight Gooden or Darryl Strawberry. But that's the nature of it. It's longevity. Everything's about longevity. You know, there's a couple of cases of absolute superstars that broke the mold because they just had a level of talent that, you know, they're outliers. Barry Sanders, you know, Gale Sayers, you know, people that had very short careers, relatively speaking, that still are Hall of Fame eligible. But then there's the Emmett Smiths of the world that, you know, just did it for forever. And I just think that, you know, in most cases, you know, you can use Tom Brady as another example. It's longevity. You know, he's the GOAT because longevity.
I know it really, I don't like Tom Brady, but I just can't even, I would love to disagree with you on that specific matter, but.
Well, obviously he wasn't the most physically gifted, and yet, you know.
He's clearly the greatest ever, but longevity makes him impossible to even argue against him.
But then every
How
once
could
in a
you
while.
argue Montana?
Right.
But anyway, that's a different.
Montana's the same thing, but every once in a while you run into a Michael Jordan and you'll be like, okay, well, he had both longevity and the physical talents, but it's really rare. And again, Michael Jordan would be the, you know, Steve Jobs equivalent, or the, you know, or the Elon Musk equivalent. So, but the whole point here is that for everybody else in the world, for the hundreds of millions or billions of people that are out there, it really is about, you know, being able to handle the grind and be able to just deal with everything you have to deal with. It's incredibly difficult. Most people cannot do it.
Well, I think the greatest barrier to doing it goes back to the earlier discussion, which is reconciling your ego with the discipline of the sort of best practices, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
That's the greatest barrier to success.
Yeah.
Not that, you know.
Yeah, because we all have this crazy need for, you know, instant gratification, unless, you know, or if we think there's that opportunity, you know, we want to go for it because we believe that for some reason, you know, somebody won the lotto once, or somebody, you know, yeah.
Tesla's never going to pull it off. I got to buy calls. I got to do it.
Right.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. But it's fascinating discussion. I mean, I think that the two most interesting things when we talk about this stuff that really resonate with people is the idea that there is this very, you know, that longevity and, you know, it's a marginal difference between success and failure. And then, you know, that's such a key thing. And then the other side is that, you know, getting people to finally accept responsibility for their own financial situation is really hard, because for years we've been dumping everything off in return for payment. to conflicted financial advisors and financial service companies who have basically, raped and pillaged the consumer. And it's time that the consumer just take over, recognize that it's on them, and choose the level of risk that they want to take, but at least put it on themselves. And I think when people put it on themselves and accept success and failure on their own, it's a lot easier for them to be successful. A lot more of those people, like you take a room full of the 500 people we had out in London last weekend, a lot more of that 500 is going to be on the incredibly successful side than if we took a random group of 500 people from just, anywhere. It's going to be 10, 20, 30 to 1. So because there's a different initiative in that room. That's all.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought. I agree. I saw it. But I would say, did you ever expect when you started Thinkorswim or got Tasty or whatever that you'd end up reinterpreting, decades of customer experience into into philosophy?
No, of course not. We didn't even, no, we had no idea what we were doing. No.
Exactly. Okay. But here you are. And you're one of the great teachers and great experts in this world.
Okay, thanks.
We get an island for you in Greece. It's called Tasty Island.
Great.
You wear like a toga, and they feed you grapes and carry you around like Alexander the Great.
Yeah, okay.
With like robes.
Where are you going with this?
I'm saying, I think that there's because at some point you're gonna be like, listen, you want me to come in here and do the open and close every day, open and close every day? You got me flying. I'm going to Texas. I'm going here, going there. Like at some point we're gonna write a letter to the CEO and get you a promotion to full guru status.
No, I like what I do. It's my fun.
I know.
Years ago, I said, I'm not doing anything anymore in my life that I don't want to do. And I love what I do. So I don't want to do anything different.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is the people in the room, sir, benefit incredibly from your presence, and it's a powerful thing to see. I admire it, and you've invested a lot to create that, and it was very apparent. And I compliment you, I would say.
He's Dylan Ratigan. I'm Tom Sosnoff. This is Truth or Skepticism. Don't believe everything he just heard from him. And thank you, Mr.
He's a Greek philosopher. Now I'm telling you, we need a toga.
Oh, God.
And we'll have quotes. The quote like Sosnoff says, the difference, like Confucius, the difference between success and failure is paper thin.
Tony Batista is rolling over right now, and
Tony is going to be apoplectic.
Apoplectic is correct. He's Dylan Ratigan. I'm Tom Sosnoff. This is Truth or Skepticism every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Please join us. We love to have you on board. Thanks so much. See you next Wednesday, Dylan.
All right, thanks, Tom. All right, bye.
Have a great weekend.